The Experience Network.
Yeah, functionally. I was like, wait, I can change one letter in this and it's another acronym.
Yeah.
Hello everybody and welcome to EXPN. This is the first episode that we're doing here. My name is Matt.
My name is Francis.
And welcome to everybody. We're here. What do we do here, Francis?
Well, here we're going to just talk about general gaming topics and really anything that we feel we can get like a good discussion out of. Something where we can feel like there's a lot of talking points about and just different points where we can bring to the table for this.
Well, yeah, sparking up discussion, taking what we think, putting it out there, and seeing what you guys think right off of it.
Exactly. And what is a more contentious topic in gaming other than something being ridiculously overpowered, or at least people thinking it's ridiculously overpowered?
If I had a nickel for every gosh darn time that somebody told me that something was overpowered in this game or underpowered in this other game,
you'd have about 10 cents.
I'd have about 10 cents. I'd get myself a candy bar, and I'd be a happier man. But that...
Can I have a piece of that candy bar?
But it depends on what kind it is.
I mean, it's everywhere though. It's like and obviously it's very often associated with people being a little salty because they lost. But in reality, very often stuff just is too strong in a game. But
yeah,
there's that kind of back and forth where it's like, is it just good and people haven't figured out how to beat it yet, or is it really overpowered?
Yeah, despite the best intentions from some developers, there can be situations where stuff is unintentionally overpowered or unintentionally underpowered, or planned to be that way, and it was greater than it was meant to be. Like there's counters in games that have counters to them, but sometimes those can be overdone or underdone.
Yeah, it's like, and it also comes down to lore of certain games too, where it's like in the backstory of a game or in the expanded universe of a game, there could be this character or this item that is very powerful in every single story that's about it, but when it finally makes it into a game, it's like there could just be this expectation that's going to blow everything away and become the best thing in the game, that it'll either fall short of it or the developers will be under such pressure to make it good that they'll make it too good.
Oh yeah, there's been such a divide in recent years, because in recent years there's been lots of games that come out that have additional content added to it, and that additional content can balance the game more often than not, and is sometimes put out for explicitly that purpose. But back in the day, it used to be just you couldn't fix the game. If something was overpowered, that's how it stayed. That's
something that really, I feel like it started around the 360 era, where it's just like you got like the ability to just patch, like the ability to patch a game is so crucial now, because it's like it gives developers a way to fix a game without just being like, well, wait for the sequel and we'll fix it then.
When was the first time that you could recall a game getting like patched, a game that you owned?
A game that I owned would probably be one of the earlier Civ titles.
Oh, Civilization? Yeah. Was that like Civilization 3, 4?
It was probably 4. It was the first one that I was actually playing when it got patched.
Oh yeah. See, I'm not a huge player of the Civilization series, as in I don't play it. But I've heard that it's definitely reliant on that sort of stuff.
Well, the main thing with Civ when it comes to stuff like that is they don't do as many patches that you would see like a shooter game or something like that, where they like actively change numbers. It'll more be when a DLC expansion comes out, then they go ahead and throw out something to change a system to make it a little bit more fair.
Yeah, I remember my first experience with something getting like patched. It was way back when they re-released a bunch of arcade titles on the Xbox 360 for Mortal Kombat. They released a Mortal Kombat trilogy on... yeah, I know.
Shocking you talking about fighting game.
Typical. But they re-released Mortal Kombat trilogy on the Xbox 360, and they included some patches for characters that had never existed before.
Right.
So, yeah. Oh, yeah, shout out. Tell me what your favorite Mortal Kombat is so I can either judge you, but...
or agree with you.
Or agree. Yeah, I would love it. But either way... What makes something overpowered?
Well, it's like I said before, there is that divide where it's like, is it truly breaking the game? Is it too strong? Is everyone using it? Or is it just a good thing? Is it strong?
Yeah, you know? There's a big difference between something being overpowered and what's the meta of a certain
Exactly.
game.
Like, say, let's use a standard example. You and I don't play a ton of League, but we know that standard MOBA setup where everyone has their heroes at the start of the game, and that's what you pick and that's how you play. That's like just your characters that you play with, and some are obviously stronger or weaker against other heroes. You know, you have a situation where champion A, we'll call him, could be strong, very strong in the game, And because of that, people might be saying nerf champion A, starting the chant in all the forums.
Yeah.
But then you have champion B come along, who was already in the game and was a very good counter to champion A. Mm-hmm. Some random player will find it and it'll pick up steam until the point where people stop playing champion A because he just gets countered everywhere.
Yeah, sometimes patience is the best virtue for this sort of a thing. But there are some cases where that is not viable.
Exactly. There are some cases where it's just something where either their counter just isn't strong enough or their counter might not even exist. It's like you have situations where the best way that I can usually tell for something like this is if it's something where it's a customizable thing where you like put stuff into your build for a game, be it a deck and a card game, a customizable shooter loadout, or just picking heroes for stuff like Overwatch or League of Legends.
That's true.
Where if every single team, or at least like I would say more than about 75% of teams or decks or mod or like loadouts in a game are using that thing, I feel like it's getting to the point where it's overrepresented and like there's got to be a thing where the developer starts to realize, is this too strong? Is our counter for this itself? Like, is it so strong that the only thing that can beat it is itself?
Yeah, that's true. What kind of genres in video games do you think really suffer from this problem the most?
Well, you know that I play a lot of Hearthstone. I play that game to death. And I will probably die playing Hearthstone.
Well, there it is. You're here first.
You'll see it in my obituary. But that game it's not that it suffers from overpowered cards, but the nature of CCGs, collectible card games, is that when a card is being developed, the developers won't necessarily test every single way to use the card because just by nature of the game, people creating their own 30 to 50 or however many card decks, depending on the game, they're going to experiment. They're going to make their own ways, and someone might find a way to use a certain card that just breaks the game as a whole. There's just like nothing you can do to beat it.
So a lot more about player interactions and discovery versus actual creation sometimes.
Exactly. Well, it's like I look back at the old Jade Druid days, going into like the beginning of the Year of the Mammoth. There was this one mana spell, I'll put it like right here, Jade Idol, that basically let the Jade Druid go infinite on you, and it was like you had infinite resources, you couldn't drain them out of resources at all, and they just kept getting more powerful and powerful. There was no way to really beat them once they got those going. So they tried releasing a card in Knights of the Frozen Throne. I'm not going to say this is specifically meant to counter it, but it was everyone looked at it and was like, this is a counter to Jade Druid, or an attempted counter at least, that when you played it, it destroyed all 1 mana spells in both players' decks and hands. So it was just like that card was gone.
So yeah, so it completely disregarded like the stuff that was overpowered got countered, and
theoretically that one didn't work very well. But
well, I mean,
that's what they tried to do. Yeah,
that's true. Yeah, there was an active effort by the developers to put in a sort of counter.
Exactly,
and that's one way that overpowered stuff gets dealt with in video games and stuff like that. I know, coming from the fighting game genre, that there is a lot of characters with a lot of different abilities that can counter each other in different ways. And especially through a lot of fighting game stuff is through one person's own strategy that might differ from another person, even if they're playing the same character. So trying to balance that is very difficult. But there are some like blazing instances of something being overpowered, or just having like a high damage output and being... There's a scale between having a high damage output and a low learning curve that's typically considered overpowered.
So basically, the higher the skill ceiling, the higher power it's allowed to have once you reach it.
Yeah, take Hit from Dragon Ball FighterZ, a recent game that just came out. Hit is extremely technical, meaning all of his combination attacks are extremely hard to execute and take a lot of practice. But they do a ton of damage when you get to that point where you can do them consistently. So that kind of pays off and balances himself, and that's why he's a kind of like mid to top tier character in the game. And he's got a lot of mix-up options that helps him out. Then you take a character like Balrog from Street Fighter V. He's a charge character, so that's a higher learning curve within itself, and had a lot of like skill and juggling associated with him. But his damage was so massive, like it counterbalanced itself. It didn't balance it enough. It wasn't like Hit, where it was like there was enough combo scaling and enough stuff to make it look reasonable. Whereas with Balrog, it would sometimes look ridiculous, even with the hot pick characters that could use him well.
Yeah, it's basically a situation where it's like the new, like the Noob Tube that people call the grenade launchers and all the Call of Duty games.
Yeah.
It's like obviously being able to get killed by that, or a rocket launcher even as your secondary weapon, is very overpowered in a traditional sense, where it's like you can just get killed in one shot. Doesn't matter where they hit you, how they could hit the ground in front of you and kill you in one shot. But the reality is you need those things that have a low skill cap and can have high power for the new players to even have a chance at beating higher skilled players. But the thing is, it just needs to be a chance, a very small chance.
Oh, yeah.
That's why the Noob Tube, when you would usually go in with it, you would get like 3 shots at most.
Yeah.
And it's like, most good players would know how to play around it and know what to do about it, but that's not going to mean they don't get caught by a blindside grenade launch.
That's true. So it's kind of that, there's that balance between low skill cap, high damage, and just that kind of counterbalance between what a person who hasn't played the game before can do and what a person who's been playing a long time can do and utilize something. Because obviously a player who's been playing more can utilize the overpowered and broken stuff much easier than the lower player. But if they can get to that almost same skill by using the same kind of overpowered techniques, then there might be something wrong.
Well, that's where like I feel the like utility of stuff kind of comes into play in your game. It's like in any strategy type of thing, you have these like utility elements that people can use to counter whatever they run into in a game, and the more useful those are and the more flexible they are, the better. I feel like the less likely you are at having something be just running away with the game being blatantly overpowered, because you can just play that instead, or focus around that just to counter it.
That's true.
I mean, it's like, of course, we've talked about replacing stuff. We've talked about bringing out counters, but there are other ways, obviously, because
absolutely.
We always know the epic chant that goes around game forums of just nerf whatever is too good, nerf whatever is just whatever is the strongest in the meta right now, and it's.
I hear nerf, and then I hear buff, and then once a buff happens, I hear nerf again.
Well, it's because people have their favorite things to play. It could be a class in a certain game. It could be a gun.
You know
in a
what's the
certain
greatest
shooter.
example of something getting buffed and nerfed in a ton, or the game that's been discussed about it probably the most to death? Overwatch.
I feel like Overwatch changes their heroes more than any other, or like updates their systems more than any other game I've seen.
Well, kudos to Blizzard for listening to their fans. I know that there are some companies out there, Capcom, who don't listen to anything that their fans have to say in terms of balancing.
Shout out to Capcom.
Shout out to Capcom. But they've been getting better. I can't give them too much flack. But anyway, Blizzard does listen a lot, and they do a lot.
Yeah.
But it's very polarizing sometimes.
Well, it's because, sometimes you do have to wait. It's like I said before with the League of Legends example. Is it actually overpowered, or is it just they haven't discovered how to beat it yet?
I remember. Do you remember? No, you haven't been playing Overwatch for too long.
About like 6 months at this point.
Yeah, there was a time where Roadhog could one-shot most of the DPS heroes in the game.
So the 200 health ones.
Yeah, he could one-shot them in one headshot and hook melee combo with his hook. He just hooked them in, headshot, smack him once, and that's dead. Yeah. And he had to stay in place when he was doing his take a breather, which gained his health back. That when people first saw the patch notes for his shots doing less damage, but he had more ammo, and they didn't add the moving while breathing for a while, but they thought that Roadhog was going to die and be dead forever. But he ended up being still viable because it didn't really change too much about him. It kind of offset itself.
Well, it's an interesting situation where, because like you said, now Roadhog can move while he's taking a breather. And it's a situation where, like, I feel personally that that's the best way to handle nerfing something that is blatantly overpowered in your game. You don't just kill the card or kill the character.
Yeah,
kill
you don't
the
just
mechanic.
blatantly take it out.
Like what I feel is the best way to do it is you take out, or like you don't take it out even. You nerf what was really strong. So in this case, Roadhog's damage. Yeah. And you give them a little bit of something to make up for it. So now he's a little bit more mobile. He's a little bit more flexible. He's a better tank. He's not a DPS guy with a ton of health.
That's true.
Like he was.
Like and it made him more fit the role that he should have been in, which was tank.
Exactly. It's like I've been joking with people about the well, not the new one anymore, but what was the new hero in Overwatch, Moira, who is
shout out to Francis's main.
We don't talk about that. It's like it's listed as a hero or a healer hero. That sounds like that's weird to say, healer hero. Yeah, it's listed as support, but everyone wants to think of it as a healer. but its damage abilities are also very strong, so it can be
like
a
a
DPS
hybrid, yeah.
healer. It's a very hybrid hero, and that's not a bad thing, but it's not. It's missing a specific role there in a way.
Yeah, it does make up for some portions that had been needed in the support category, especially with the long range.
Well, let's
and
not
the
forget
damaging.
about the infamous nerf they had to do to Mercy
Yeah.
recently.
I don't want to bring up everything that they
we
did.
don't talk about Mercy.
Mercy's had so many buffs and nerfs over the time that it's just impossible to tell where she stands.
Well, I would argue that's because of the nature of what Mercy is as almost a pure healer in the game.
Yeah.
Where it's like she's either so good that every team needs one of her, and then if there's a good Mercy that the team just never dies, or her healing's so useless that there's no point in using her.
To be fair, Resurrection's not great anymore.
Thankfully.
But shout out to those Mercy 4-man res plays of the game.
Yeah, honestly, I feel
time.
like play of the game is one of the reasons in Overwatch why people feel like things are overpowered so often, though, because when they see like when someone feels like they had a play of the game, like say they got like a triple kill without using any abilities, like or something like that.
Yeah, like in the lower levels, you'll see tons of Bastion plays of the game, and people in the lower levels are always complaining about Bastion all the time.
Because it's like you see stuff that people are like, that took no skill at all, and they're just like, I had to do this, this, and this, but it's like, what are you gonna do? That's just what the random. I mean, it's functionally random that it shows that. Obviously, some plays are better than others.
Hey,
but
Blizzard, buff Torbjorn. Do it.
We don't need more Torbjorn plays of the game where he's just whacking a turret while it kills stuff.
2 turrets. Think about it.
I would actually be okay with that if they were significantly weaker. I would be okay with
Both
that.
of them get the same effects, but he has to manage 2 turrets at once. Think about it.
It would be interesting, but I feel like that would blatantly make him overpowered in that game.
I just want to see it. It'd be funny.
Well, of course. I mean, look, even sticking with Overwatch, like there's another way that people will do it, and it's just like, and it's much easier to do in a game like Overwatch as opposed to a game like Hearthstone or any shooter game.
Now, for the record, we only bring up Overwatch so much because it's a great example point. Because it's a game that gets talked about a lot,
and it's a game that gets changed a lot.
That's true.
But recently, and I don't believe it's happened yet, or it might have just happened, Hanzo's Scatter Arrow has been changed to a completely different ability. It's a similar flavor of ability, but it does not behave the same way.
Yes. We won't get into too many details, but for the records, with Scatter Arrow being able to take out 400 health heroes and tanks in one shot, kind of ridiculous.
It's
because scattering somebody at their feet is less skill than we would.
Well, I know when I first started playing a little bit, like, I obviously looked through all the heroes the first time. I was like, oh, what does this one do? What does this one do? And when I read Scatter Arrow, and I feel like this was their intention when Blizzard was making this ability, was it was going to be like, there's a room here, there's like 2 or 3 heroes in it, I'm going to fire a Scatter Arrow and see if I get a kill, do a bunch of damage to a bunch of people. But because of the way that it just worked, and like there was no real way that Blizzard could fix this really without making it useless in that other situation.
That's true. They couldn't nerf the damage, or
because then it would be useless in any other situation besides shooting its own.
That's that classic example of removing and replacing, because it's not something that they could fix easily or within enough time.
I mean, it's literally it's literally the example of the players finding something that maybe the developers just never thought of being used that way.
And who knows? It could be the same situation as Rokod. Volley Arrow could be just as crazy as Scatter was, or whatever they're trying to do. I've heard rumors of Volley Arrow.
We'll find out tonight.
We'll find out. But moving on from Overwatch a little bit. There's other
games in Overwatch.
There are other games that's had great examples of being able to put in stuff that's counter to it, but sometimes that can be from game to game, which is a little controversial from waiting to an entire new title to fix what was broken in the last one.
Well, that's just, I mean, it's what we had to deal with before online patches were a thing, and it's one of those things where I almost
downloadable content.
I feel like it's a thing where we're almost a little, I don't want to say spoiled, but kind of spoiled by the ability to hot fix a game.
Yeah.
And stuff like that, where it's like now it's the standard. It's what we expect.
Yeah, take old arcade classic Fatal Fury. It had an overpowered boss character that was extremely cheap, as it was the nature of fighting game bosses. But as the games progressed, he got nerfed more and more. And he was still a powerful boss, but then he became a playable character and was balanced, therefore, to fit others. There are some games that are still crazy in terms of how broken they were before the next game got released. In some cases, the next game got released so fast in order to fix those problems. I'm especially referring to some arcade stuff like the Street Fighter Alpha 2 craziness. I'm fairly certain it was Alpha 2, though correct me if I'm wrong, with Ibuki, who had a 100% combo that could take you from one end to the other. They didn't fix it. They just waited until the next release, which I believe was Street Fighter, one version of Street Fighter 3. It could have been Third Strike, and they fixed that issue.
Well, it's I think it's part of that is because of the limitations of AI in many games. And they have to make stuff so strong for the AI just because they can't make the AI good enough to think like a player would. Like, going back to Civ, like, in the higher difficulties of Civ, they can only do so much to make the AI better. So what they do is they give the AI bonuses. They give the AI, like, in the beginning of a normal Civilization game, you start with 1 settler and 1 warrior. That's it. But the AI will start with, like, 5 or 6 or 5 settlers or 4 settlers. I forget what exactly it is for D&D, but it's a lot for the game because starting with 4 or 5 cities is a lot more than starting with 1 city, obviously.
Oh man. You know what's one other good thing to do though when there's like one overpowered thing?
What?
Buff everything else.
Yeah.
Get everything else to that level.
And honestly,
it's not always used. It's not used very often.
It can be great though for the pace of your game.
Yeah. And buffs sometimes are better than nerfs. Because nerfs can take people who've been playing a certain character, for instance, in a fighting game, or using a certain loadout or set in a shooter, or a certain character, and they've been playing for a while and enjoyed how they were, even if they were overpowered, and then they get nerfed, and then they feel bad, and they're like, why'd you do this? I'm never playing this game again.
How dare you change my favorite thing?
Instead, buff the people around them and give them a proper challenge, or something like that.
It is very much a psychological thing where obviously the game companies don't want to make
the singular game company.
The only game company in the world, obviously. Valve is our master. I don't know why I chose Valve, but it's a psychological thing though, where we hate seeing what we've used for so long become weaker, and it's because we became accustomed to it.
Yeah.
But by buffing other things instead, and obviously you can't. It's harder to do that while balancing everything.
Yeah.
But by buffing other things, and especially counters,
yeah, that's true.
By buffing other characters and other things in the game, you get to the point where players that may have played your overpowered thing will switch up their strategy, not just to play around whatever is stronger now, but maybe even to just try it out. Like if I'm playing a shooter and I hear that the gun that I've never used in the game, or like I used maybe in the campaign but not in the game itself, got buffed, I'll be like, I'll go try it out, at least like for a match or two, and see how it goes.
It doesn't even have to be a straight buff by the developer. It could be like a secret that a high-level player figured out completely on their own and completely changed the meta within a singular moment.
And funnily enough, that's happened, I know, especially in Hearthstone, outside of like meta-changing events from Blizzard, where it's like, it wasn't the release of a new expansion, it wasn't a change to cards or to formats, it was just that someone figured out how to use a card well. Like,
kind of plays on the motif of some patience and letting people figure stuff out too.
Exactly.
Especially if a game's been new release. That's why you never listen to people who bellyache on the moment of a game's release, because they haven't found it all yet.
It's like, it goes back to that fine line though of how long do you wait? How long is it worth it? Because there is a risk to the developer, especially when something is very overpowered and there's a huge public outcry, because obviously sometimes it's just a little guy on the forum talking about how something is too strong.
Yeah, that's when those day one nerfs happen, like instantaneously.
Because it's like, though, if the developer waits too long, especially if their game is screaming about it, like everyone playing the game is like, this gun's ridiculous, this character's ridiculous, this card's ridiculous, whatever it is.
And that's just taking community feedback and
exactly, because it's like, the developer obviously has to take into account where it's like, do we wait for them to try and figure something out, or do we just fix it? Because the developer knows in their head what the counter was supposed to be, what the weakness of this thing was supposed to be. Like, obviously, we all know the joke for in Call of Duty where you could snipe someone from across the map with a shotgun. Obviously, that wasn't supposed to happen in most games. At least I hope it wasn't.
Not many of the games I played.
Yeah. But it's like, obviously, the weakness of a shotgun is range. The weakness of a sniper rifle is something close. It's unless you're doing 360 no scope montages, and then you're just.
You will never see any of those here because neither of us are skilled.
I'm a sniper, but I'm a normal sniper. There's a difference. Listen, but it's like there is that like weakness though. Like every powerful thing, because obviously your middle of the road stuff isn't going to have a specific weakness because it's not powerful enough to really like earn a dedicated weakness. But something that is high power in your game will most likely have a weakness that can beat it outright in like not every situation, hopefully, but like 75%, 80%, 90% of situations, it will lose to that weakness.
Also, it can be something that's easy to pick up on, too, if you're just picking up the game. It can be like that instant logic, like the sniper rifle and the shotgun thing. That's instant logic. If you played any other type of shooter and you go into a game and they have a shotgun and a sniper rifle, you know exactly what situations those are meant to be used.
I know I've jokingly said before in a lot of Halo matches where I picked up a shotgun and an energy sword, I'm like, if someone comes at me from more than 5 feet away, I'm going to die. It's just the reality of the situation.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I still wanted the 2 powerful
Yeah, but
weapons.
then it becomes your fault for picking a shotgun
it becomes,
and an energy sword.
One of the things I actually enjoy, and I will admit that some stuff being a little overpowered can make some stuff fun in games. When you play around it, and I don't mean like play the counter, I mean like you find something that's underpowered and you try and figure out a way to make it, that makes it good.
Yeah.
It's like what we said before.
That's like taking something from a lower tier and trying to utilize it.
And you know, people have become famous and had a lot of fun just playing these like very weak, very joke memey cards or very joke memey strategies or very joke memey guns in any shooter, and just being like, I'm gonna make this work.
Oh
like,
yeah.
It doesn't matter how, they're gonna find a way. They'll play like 30 matches and they'll have one success.
One of the classic tropes in fighting games is the gimmick character, the character that is designed to be a troll and designed to like have a total moveset around it. Dan Hibiki.
I mean, even if you look at Pokemon, there's like the strategy where you use a level 1 Rattata with a Focus Sash, Endeavor, and Quick Attack, and just sweep the Elite Four.
Or if you take like a Beedrill to the Elite Four or something like that.
Yeah, it's like I've seen people use them as strategy, or like not strategies, but like challenges for themselves in single player games like Pokemon, where they're like, I'm using this Pokemon the entire run, only this Pokemon, and I'm not evolving it. And it's a great challenge.
Yeah, Beldum. Do it. I've done that.
Beldum's harder. Only learns 1 move. Pokemon people, you know what I'm talking about.
It's great.
It's a great challenge though, because it's like I know going to a shooter as another example. My friend and I in high school, we loved doing Black Ops 1 zombie mode with one type of gun only. We would grab we would say we're only using shotguns, or we would say we're only using pistols.
Yeah.
So we would be like, we have to pray for luck from the mystery box, because if it gave us something we couldn't pick, we just couldn't use it.
There it is.
And it's like a weird kind of double take where it's like, obviously these things have to be changed. Like stuff that's bad, in most cases, is not bad for a reason. They have a gimmick, and people have to try and make it work somehow.
That's true. Gimmicks are definitely important for that fun aspect and that troll aspect for those kind of players who just want to see other players suffer. And there's always one. There's always at least one of those.
Or 5 million of those.
Or too many.
Shout out to anyone playing Fortnite right now.
Oh, goodness.
But
I don't even know the Fortnite meta.
You don't want to. You don't want to. It is very much a thing, though, where it's like, it's a dynamic where there's do you change the card to make your meta better, or do you let people kind of figure it out? And then there's people still have fun with it.
And then there's those situations where people take something that's low tier and the developers buff it, but then maybe goes a little too far. I'm going to talk a little bit about Tom Clancy's Rainbow Six Siege and a character that recently got buffed, Blitz. Blitz is a shield operator who can have a lot of defense to him and has a flashbang tied to the end of that shield. Great for the strategic situations you get yourself in that game. But he used to be pretty bad because his shield is the smallest in the game, and therefore he can get shot in like the shoulders and the legs a lot easier. And obviously you have to put the shield down to shoot. But he was really slow too. He was like, everybody's based on like armor 3 or speed 3 or a variation of 2-1, and he was 2 I think.
Oof.
So then they changed him to speed 3 armor 1, which was supposed to be an alright like buff. That's what people wanted for a long time, ever since the game's release. But then he became a speed demon who just would charge people with a shield that would be panicking for people who have been set up in these sitting defensive positions. And it's kind of hard to get around it if a good blitz positions themselves correctly.
It's basically, the way I'm reading it is, it went from a situation where he was a tank that just wasn't built well enough to function as a tank. And when they tried to make him a better tank, he just stopped being a tank and became a more mobile.
Yeah, that's like taking them out of their role, even though you tried to buff them a little bit more. Now people are calling out for is a nerf, but they don't know what to do because bringing him back to the same level would get that same argument.
It's a very much a situation where it's like that is the one hard thing about buffing stuff that is very weak in a game, because you can go from something being just weak or underpowered or especially a niche. Like if you have a niche character or a niche mechanic and you buff it because you want more people to use it, you think it's a fun mechanic, you want people to try it out. But then it stops being a niche potentially if you go too far. It stops being that thing where it's like it's a situational little thing where you can like say you're like playing capture the flag or something like that in a shooter, and you're like, this is a mechanic that's great in capture the flag if you're playing defense. You buff it, it's what everyone's using in every game mode.
That's true. Yeah, that's why you don't want to buff something to the point that it breaks the game. You know, it destroys what the game was trying to be, or like becomes so clear and defined in the meta that it's all you see.
Well, that's where the hard decision comes in for any developer, really. It's like, do we make a change to what is really a broken meta, or is it a broken meta even, is the real question for them.
Yeah.
And what change do we make? Do we make the things that is breaking our meta weaker? Do we try and bring everything else up to its power level? Or do we just try to say, like, here's how you beat it?
Yeah. That's definitely something that makes me glad that I'm not a developer for those games that have those issues right now.
Yeah, and I'm not entirely sure if any one game is more susceptible, or type of game is more susceptible.
I think games with more variety have that are susceptible to that. If you have variety in like weapons or characters or anything, you're bound to have that issue.
Well, of course. I mean, you look at a game like chess. The only thing that's variable about the game is whether or not you're going first.
Yeah.
And people will say going first is a lot better.
Hey, I don't believe that. I always pick
black?
I always pick black pieces.
See, and even then, people like to play that.
Yeah,
different ways, because chess is the typical balanced game, perfectly balanced.
Oh yeah, that's the quintessential one.
Of course, the issue with that there is, though, if a game is perfectly balanced, it becomes a game where there's just 5 or 6 set strategies that people execute at anything except for very low or very high levels of play,
and it becomes boring. It is little variety. Becomes boring, but it's perfectly balanced.
Imbalanced games are arguably the most fun games because there is that flexibility.
Yep, and that's what makes some things fun, even if they are overpowered a little bit.
Yeah,
that's the thing. You just don't want to make the things that are grossly overpowered.
Of course.
There's in a game with variety, you're always going to find something that's stronger than something else.
Basically, like, the best ways to do it, I would say, are your strong things need to have a way to beat them, obviously, but that way to beat them needs to be something that is not uber strong itself.
Yeah.
It could be something that's mid-tier, or even better if you want to make a really fun niche.
Yeah, especially
you can have one low power thing in every other situation, but it can counter 3 or 4 strong things. And
then there's those kind of situations where on a team-based game, or it's less about the individual and what overpowered is just for them, and what's overpowered in synergy with others.
See, that's where you got to be careful, though, the most, because you could nerf one synergy to try and make this one combo stop happening, and you will see both things stop. It will just not exist in your game at that point.
It'll just completely disrupt the flow of everything that's been going on with it.
That's why combos are honestly so rare to be like released together to a certain extent, because they're like, if this is too strong, we have to break the combo apart, obviously, but we have to nerf either half of the combo or part of the combo if it's more than 2 pieces.
Exactly.
Or nerf the connection between them. And any of those can make every part of that combo disappear from your meta. And it could have been something that the developers spent tons of time on, being like, this is going to be fun, everyone's going to love this, and it's going to be our new meta. Unfortunately, it was more of their meta than they anticipated.
Yep. You don't want things to get repetitive, but you don't want things to get too different.
Well, I feel like cyclical games do have a slight disadvantage when it comes to that, though. Games like your Overwatches, your Hearthstones, your World of Warcrafts. I realize I just mentioned 3 Blizzard games there. Your League of Legends for a little variety. I love you, Blizzard. Hi. But it's like, because you want every expansion, you want every new game, even games that have like yearly releases, like your sports games, obviously, but also like your Halos, your Call of Duties, all that stuff. Yeah. You want your next installment, you want your next expansion to feel like something meaningful, like something's changing the game. But if you make it too good, it becomes the game. If you make it too weak, people are like, well, then why did I buy this?
That's true. Speaking of sports games, talk about having to pay real life money to get the overpowered thing.
Okay.
Talk about having to do that.
Okay.
FIFA.
FIFA.
FIFA. Think about it. in the career modes that the people play the most, then they have to think about the person who pays like the tons of money to get Lionel Messi or something like that.
So not only that, actually, where you have like
or
a custom teams,
sorry
obviously.
if I mispronounced it.
You're making a Messi of these names, man. But it's like you have a situation where in games like that, especially like, okay, I play a lot of 2K basketball. In the My Career mode, you can buy the virtual currency that you use to upgrade your personal character with real money. I'm not saying microtransactions are a bad thing, but if one type of player is more powerful than the other,
we leave that to
next week.
We leave that to your kind of discussion. Next week. Next week we'll get more into that.
But it's like
passionate.
when there's one type of thing like is decidedly better, people will rush to buy it. But if there are many types of things that were great but not overpowered, then you have the people taking their time, trying things out, and just feeling around a little bit more before they rush to the thing that they want.
That's true. Oh man.
Like if I were playing any card game really, like, and I knew there was this one card that will win every single game for me that I play. Obviously, no Overpowered card is that ridiculous, but it's close. I would just buy pack after pack after pack until I get that.
Well, yeah, think about it. If there was a character in a fighting game that came out as part of downloadable content, and I'd have to buy it on my own separate money, or save up whatever in-game currency, all games work differently, but there could be that situation where my complete playstyle and my sense of happiness and fun could be completely what that character is, that character that just came out. So I have to make the decision of whether I want to spend money and enjoy the game even more, or save back and be conservative about my cash, which is obviously
the better life choice.
That is a better life choice, but
well, that is also why nerfs are so.
That's true. But think about it. I think about if I spent money on that character and then he got nerfed.
Exactly. Like I don't want to buy a new expansion for like Destiny and find out that the new gun that is like the focus of the game that you get at the end of the campaign for the expansion just gets nerfed, and I'm like, okay, well I bought that for nothing.
Which one are you talking about?
It hasn't happened yet. We don't want to jinx it.
I was about to be like, Gjallarhorn? No.
The Gjallarhorn.
The Gjallarhorn?
Oh god, I missed that.
Yeah, man. I haven't touched Destiny in a while.
Dear Bungie, bring back Gjallarhorn in Destiny 2, please. Don't do that.
What are your hopes and possibilities for these kind of situations in the future, though?
Well, I honestly hope that I don't have a specific thing that I obviously want nerfed, because I'm not gonna light a torch and be like, this thing must die. But I do wish that there was like a lot more flexibility in games like this, where it's like you basically where things are less focused on pure power, and it's like how you put stuff together. Like I know some fighting games that you play have you build a 3 or 5 person team to go into each fight with.
Yeah.
So it's like
you build your Marvel
synergies
versus Capcom or your Dragon Ball FighterZ.
Exactly. It's like you build those synergies, you build that plan of attack. And it could be in any game. Like hell, in a sports game, you build your team.
Yeah.
And it's like you build that strategy into it, and then from there it's all execution. Do you play your strategy well? Does someone figure out how to beat your strategy? Not are you playing a basketball game and do you have LeBron James?
I think that at least my future hopes for this kind of dilemma is that developers and players get a good line of communication between each other, and they can fix the problems that way. We see it despite Overwatch getting a lot of flack for tons of different nerfs and buffs and stuff, I appreciate that Blizzard listens.
Blizzard will listen,
and that makes the fans a little more comfortable, or at least the majority of them. There's always going to be that minority that's not
there will
satisfied.
always be angry fans in every type of game, but just having that ability to be like, our players are worried about something, let's figure out what we can change. And it's just comes down to that, being able to be like, let's fix it. If
your game has a great relationship between developer and player, then you can rest a little easier in terms of finding a problem with the game and hoping that it gets fixed.
It's all it takes. Much like many things in life, it just takes communication.
Just takes communication, time, a little bit of patience, and trust in some of the things that go on.
Exactly. I mean, some things will stay overpowered because they're meant to be strong, and you just keep losing to it. You're just unlucky in some cases. Like, I've had days where I'll lose to 300 things, but one thing I lose, like, say I lose, obviously this is an exaggeration, but say I lose 300 matches in a game, and 100 of them happen to be to the same thing, I'm going to feel a little mad about it. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that 100 thing is overpowered.
Yeah, if I go online in a fighting game and I get beat by the toppest tier character, or whoever's considered top tier at the time, I'm not going to blame the character. I'm going to blame me for not doing as well as I could have. And I'm going to blame the other player for being too good.
And you know what you're going to do in that situation? Unless, obviously, that hero is actually overpowered. You're going to go and you're going to counter it. You're going to
I'm going to put my time in practice.
The next time you go out there, you're going to be ready to face it.
Exactly. I think that's a good amount of time that we've spent discussing this great and somewhat, like, you know, great discussion.
It's a very deep topic. Yeah.
It's a deep topic.
We may revisit it if something, if there's a notable nerf or buff that we want to talk about.
But anyway, thank you so much for listening to all of us, and please, we want to hear about your opinions on this too, and maybe other genres that we may have missed, or situations that you've encountered that you felt something was overpowered.
In fact, if in the comments, go ahead and put one thing that you think is really overpowered and needs to change, or one thing that you'd like to see buffed.
Oh yeah, we'd love to hear it. We'll mention you probably in this next video, the ones that we like the most.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously, I feel like we've alluded to it so much now that we kind of have to talk about microtransactions next time.
Oh yeah, next topic to be discussed. But anyway, thank you so very much, and we'll see you next time. This was EXPN. I'm Matt.
I'm Francis.
And we'll see you next time.
Bye.